Hello, property managers. Welcome to another episode of the Fair Housing Insiders. I'm your host, Michael Coughlin, and we have a really important topic to talk about today. I need you to stick around because Kathi, Leslie, and I are going to be discussing the future of fair housing. Let's dive in. Hello, Internet. Hello, property managers. Another episode of the Fair Housing Insiders. This is a really important one we have today. With us is fair housing attorney Leslie Tucker, and also our president and founder, as well as a fair housing attorney, Kathi Williams. Thank you both so much for being here today. So as I'm sure a lot of people are aware, there has been a lot of chaos surrounding this administration in a million different arms of the government. But the ones we're going to be focusing on right now are HUD and FHEO offices. I would love for Leslie, for you to kind of break down for our audience what has been going on with the Trump administration and how they're approaching HUD and its initiatives.
Well, a lot has been going on with all federal agencies, and HUD has certainly not been exempt from that. I guess a few of the major changes that we are seeing, I guess, amongst all agencies is kind of the purging of any DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, any programs, any funding, really any mention of DEI or any of the protections or equality initiatives that it advances. It's sort of been just erased. It's been given this very negative tint by the administration. And so that is one of the major changes that has happened just throughout the entire federal government. Another major one is DOGE, which is, I guess, part of this administration, has been downsizing not only the funding for different agencies, but also reducing employees. So massive layoffs amongst all the agencies. HUD has had a huge downsizing, and FHEO, which is the enforcement arm of HUD, their downsizing has almost been worse than all the other branches of HUD. So it has now been reduced to, I guess, kind of bare bones staffing. And that is a huge change. And then lastly, HUD has really cut a lot of the funding that it sends out to the various fair housing advocacy groups and enforcement groups throughout the country, which most states have kind of their own private groups that operate within the state. And the grants and the funding that HUD provides to those groups have been either cut entirely or drastically reduced. So those are some of the major changes we've seen.
Thanks for breaking that down, because I'm sure, like for most people out there and for our audience, it's hard to keep track of everything because there's so much going on so fast. So the real reason that we wanted to make this video and highlight it so much is because I personally have been hearing a lot of confusion and concern from our clients and industry partners, which again is completely understandable. Kathi, what have you been hearing concerns about?
Well, and as you say, with uncertainty just comes a lot of questions. And I don't know that we have the answers, but we want to recognize the questions and how they impact our customers out there in the housing industry. For instance, because of economic uncertainty with the market, and with future development of apartment complexes for our customers, what is that going to mean? And if they need to cut their budgets, should they be cutting them in the area of training, which is, of course, what we are all about here at the fair housing industry, is reminding the industry constantly of its need to stay abreast and keep their employees informed through training. So while that is always something that gets considered, especially if we're entering a difficult period for the markets, as far as economic uncertainty, we also have to remember that the Fair Housing Act has been part of our country's fabric and culture, as well as it's part of its business with the housing industry. It's been around for over 60 years. And with that kind of history, while we are going to see some changes, as Leslie was talking about, with HUD and with enforcement by the federal government through FHEO at HUD, and probably some changes in the way the Justice Department goes about its enforcement of the Fair Housing Act, we're still going to have a federal law, and we will have state and local laws as well that their agencies are going to be enforcing. The laws are not going away. We're just going to see some differences in the way that they're enforced and maybe in the way that the investigations occur.
Okay, that's interesting, and that makes sense. Leslie, what about on your end? What have your clients been talking about? What have they been probably calling you frantic, asking for answers?
Yeah. And a lot of what I'm hearing from some of my clients are some of the concerns that I addressed earlier about sort of the elimination of all DEI programs and initiatives, kind of from all aspects of the federal government. And there's been some confusion with my clients who, a lot of whom receive federal funds from the government is they're saying, well, so we're not allowed to really acknowledge diversity, equity, inclusion, but we are still expected to protect people's rights and market in a diverse way and make sure we're including everyone in our marketing programs and our, tenant demographics. So these things seem to conflict. Should we still be concerned about our fair housing obligations in light of the fact that this administration doesn't seem to want to acknowledge diversity, equity, and inclusion? And not just doesn't want to acknowledge it, but makes it seem like a bad word. Mm-hmm. And that is a tough thing to come to grips with. I personally really haven't come to grips with it myself, but so I understand the confusion that I'm hearing from my clients. And really all I can say is Kathi has sort of explained that the enforcement arm may have been reduced and maybe changed, but it is still there. And the fact that DEI, when it comes to this administration, doesn't seem to be a priority to your tenants and your applicants, that doesn't change the way they see and perceive acts of potential discrimination, or if they feel like they're being wronged or treated differently. It's not going to stop them from filing a complaint. The priorities of this administration has nothing to do with how they perceive the way that they are treated. So complaints will still be filed regardless of how this administration prioritizes DEI. And if complaints are still filed, this law is still being enforced. So,
right.
Yeah.
I actually, it makes me think of the last period of, economic and, social chaos and uncertainty was COVID, which was actually, around 5 years ago, which seems like a lifetime ago. But I remember similar discussions back then. And I think people would take the same route, being like, oh, because people aren't going to work, because staffing is bare bones, that this kind of stuff won't happen anymore, that fair housing is, on pause. And if I remember correctly, the number of complaints skyrocketed during COVID, and they have continued to go up. So it seems like, if anything, times of uncertainty make people, I don't know, more aware of their rights and their laws, because when people get into a desperate situation, they have to make sometimes harsh choices, and people that can't afford housing are being forced out may decide that they want to take their housing provider to court, to try to stay in their property, to try to live the same way that they always want to live, or just to make money sometimes. So I think if anything, it's a potentially more dangerous time for fair housing, if that makes any sense. Despite the fact that, like you said, it's still the law of the land. So we can both agree that despite everything happening, fair housing is not dead. Is that correct?
No, it's not dead. I think it's going to be different in that I think we'll see more enforcement by the states. And almost all of them have their own laws. Remember that. In the past, HUD would send a complaint to the state to investigate, or to the local government agency. We call those agencies FAP agencies. And HUD would send those cases that were dual filed down to the state and local government to enforce. That's still going to happen. And I think the states are probably going to have to step up into the void that HUD will leave, but we're still going to have enforcement. And Leslie, what about all those private plaintiff lawyers who are going to be looking for cases out there?
Right, exactly. Whether you know it or not, most people do currently file complaints with HUD, but they haven't had to. The law permits people to go straight into court, into litigation, if they want to. So if people are finding that HUD is just sort of not available for full investigations, or if things are taking too long, I think there's a really good chance that people will instead seek to enforce their rights through the courts, if they feel like it's going to benefit them from a time perspective, or maybe a monetary perspective. So those plaintiffs' attorneys, I feel like, are going to get a lot busier.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree, when you're moving from a investigation, whether it's from HUD, a state FIP agency, and it moves to a private attorney, obviously the motivation becomes much, much more about money and settlements, as opposed to following the law and regulation. So if anything, that's potentially a worse place to be. Leslie, I think in some of our research, didn't we find out that HUD does a much lower percentage of these cases than we even thought? Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. With the numbers that are published when it comes to fair housing complaints, I actually did learn that local fair housing agencies, we refer to them as FIPs. These are the groups that do receive government grants a lot, but they do a lot of fair housing testing, and they can do enforcement as well. They investigate and handle many more complaints every year than HUD actually does. So those agencies are still very much active. Even without grants, they are still very active. They can file complaints on their own behalf, on the behalf of tenants who contact them, and they can ask for money in those complaints. So that will continue to happen, especially as their funding gets cut.
Yeah. So it sounds like we said before, fair housing is still the law of the land. It's not going anywhere. And if anything, this time of uncertainty, while it seems scary and there's still a lot of questions to be answered, I don't think it changes anything about the way that you need to be running your operations. You need to still be considering fair housing and your day-to-day operations and those dreaded special circumstances. You need to continue your training, because if anything, the history has told us that the possibility for complaints to rise is actually there right now. So we just wanted to really break this down for everybody, calm your nerves a little bit. Nothing historic has changed in the world of fair housing yet. But certainly, please keep your eye on the fair housing news. Stay up to date with channels like us so that you know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen as soon as we do. Well, Leslie and Kathi, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. And we hope you and your audience, our audience, enjoyed the episode as well. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share these videos with your team. We've got a lot more interesting topics to come. So this has been another episode of the Fair Housing Insiders. Come and see us again. Happy trading.